This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning. With your permission, could I share with you one more thing? Okay, we're in Athens. I want to share with you something that I heard in the name of Rav Soloveitchik. I want to present it to you. I want you to think about it. I heard this from Rav Hershel Schachter personally, and it's also in the biography of Rav Soloveitchik, and it's based on the Gemara in Brachos. I want you to think about it. There's a famous Gemara in Brachos. David HaMelech would compare himself to the kings of the nations of the world. David HaMelech would say the kings of the nations of the world, they sit in royalty, they sit in pomp and ceremony, but they're not willing to get their hands dirty. But David HaMelech says, Va'ani yadai melachlachos, my hands are soiled, my hands are dirty, bedam, with blood, shapir v'shilya, a placenta and a uterus, kedei latar isha labala. In other words, like many rabbanim, sometimes they have to look at maros. So it's not, it's not the cleanest job, but somebody's got to do it. So literally, David HaMelech is saying, the nations of the world, they sit in pomp and ceremony, but I get down and dirty. What exactly is David HaMelech saying? So Rav Soloveitchik would say, what is the nekuda and the difference between Chachmas Yavan and Chachmas Yisrael? The Yavanim believed that the greatness of man was only in his mind, thought, philosophy, probing the mysteries of the universe. For them, menial labor was considered demeaning. Working the land was considered demeaning. Therefore, when the Greeks were trying to discover the mysteries of the universe, they wanted to know about gravity, they thought about it. They wanted to know about the water system, they thought about it. They wanted to know about biology, they extrapolated, they thought about it. But Chachmei Yisrael, we don't philosophize. Chachmei Yisrael, they do experimentation. Chachmei Yisrael follow halachically science. They experiment. When David HaMelech says, my hands are dirty with shapir v'shilya, because we don't believe in philosophy. We believe in experimentation. So what does that mean? It sounds almost the opposite. It sounds like we believe in science, we believe in experimentation. I want to share with you Ramban. The Ramban, in the beginning of Elo Treifos, asks, there's a shaila in the Gemara, could a treifa live or not? Could a treifa survive or not? You know what a treifa is? Treifa is an animal that has a mortal wound. And the question is, could an animal survive 12 months or not? And the Ramban asks the question, you can't have a machloikis about that. Get 1,000 animals and do an experiment. Says Ramban Yisoid, the Chachmei Yisrael will never argue in Metzius. You know why? How do you argue in reality? Just experiment. The Gemara is full of experiments that the Chachamim conducted. But the Greeks would never experiment. They would philosophize, they would think, they would probe. And whether their conclusions actually coincided with science or not was not relevant to them. To them, the reality of what they saw before their eyes did not have bearing on what their minds told them. But in halacha, there's a famous rule in Lamdas. Anybody who learned in yeshiva knows you can't have a machlokes in Metzius. Why? So one of the reasons is because just experiment. I mean, the Ramban is writing. The Ramban is saying the Chachamim would never argue what a treifa is, because they could easily take 1,000 animals, put them in a pen, and see whether the treifas live or they don't live. Now, by the way, a support to this idea is from the Gemara in Bechoros that we learned yesterday. The Gemara in Bechoros says the Chachmei Atuna asked Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanania, and they were discussing how long it takes for a snake to give birth. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanania said 7 years. So the Greeks said 3 years. The Greeks said, we saw. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanania says, your experiment was faulty, because everybody knows whenever you experiment, it has to be an authentic experiment. But those snakes were already 4 years pregnant. So again, that shows that the Greeks were not transparent in their process of experimentation. So this is another idea of the difference between Chachmei Yisrael and Chachmei Umas Ha'olam. In other words, we will not rely in halacha just based on philosophy alone. It has to be something, in other words, this is in a certain sense the opposite of what many think intuitively, but when it comes to halacha, the halacha will integrate the reality of experimentation even more than any other nations of the world. Okay, good?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.